Hello everyone, and welcome to your lecture on how to organize and complete your assignment for this module. We are obviously talking about your music industry case study. So let me run through, first of all, what the assignment is. Okay, so let's take a look here. We have to create a case study on either an activity, so that could be a song. You can write your essay on a composition of your preference, why it was written, what's the context of it, how it was written, and so on and so forth. You can also write your case study on an organization. This could be any kind of business really in the music industry, recording studio, private music school, a function band that's maybe even turned itself into a limited company. They exist. So think about whether maybe a case study on an actual professional organization is what you need to explore, or it could even be on a cohort of people within the music industry. Again, it could be music producers, it could be bookies, right? So whoever is responsible for booking bands at venues, it could be like what is the job description of a booking agent who works for the O2 Academy, right? Think as big as you wish. Um, Now, what we also need to discuss here today is how will you go about organizing your case study, your presentation. We know that your presentation has to be 10 minutes long, which is not a long time, but it can be wasted very easily. And you also need to provide a 500 word written presentation on the topic, which will complement your oral presentation. So think about that. Don't be redundant. Um, so the 10-minute presentation has to include background and context of your chosen topic, your research questions. I'm going to get more in depth on that. Um, your research methods or methodologies, how you will organize your time around constructing this case study and presentation. And you have to then present your own critique of the topic you've chosen. What's the positives, the negatives, the flaws, etc. Okay, first and foremost, we need to organize our thoughts. And in my opinion, the quickest way for you to really feel comfortable with what you're writing about is that you know what questions you're trying to answer. So let's talk about research questions. Fundamentally, you're asking a question that's based on maybe a problem you're trying to solve in the music industry, a problem that you have identified, and through your critique and perhaps future impact, you will solve or attempt to solve that problem. Or it could just be a problem you're trying to understand. It might not be a problem from the standpoint of a flaw in the system. It doesn't have to be necessarily that. It could just be a gap in your knowledge. Look at the landscape of the music industry. I'm sure there's plenty of blind spots uh, when it comes to how to operate within those subsections or subsectors of the industry. Okay, research methodology, how do you define that? It's obviously directly connected to the questions you've chosen or posed. In this case, then it's really like how will you find the answers? Okay, you have to then have a method of pursuing or to pursue those questions you've posed. And then with your critique, you have to look at things critically, meaning you're not going to focus on criticizing things. Be aware of that nuance. It's not criticism, it's critiquing. And so you are going to be assessing the positives, the negatives, and ultimately you can insert your opinion, but be wary of making it about what you think rather than what it is. Okay, so now let's talk about your learning outcomes. So of course, if you read your assessment sheet, you'll see that you have to demonstrate a critical understanding of the social and cultural context of a specific area of the music industry. and explore the key issues relevant to that case study subject operation. So if you're talking about private music school, let's say, and I'm going to use my own experience to give you an example, you will have to think about the marketplace within that music school is inserted. Is it a rich, affluent area? Is it a very deprived area? In my own personal professional experience, I've done both. I currently have schools in deprived areas and in affluent areas. And trust me, it's quite interesting to understand those differences. And it will allow you to fast track your success if you understand what the market is about once you are dealing with your own professional opportunities. The criteria is that you have to identify, understand, and relate a range of appropriate sources and subject knowledge. Okay, so don't just tell us what you think about said subject that you've chosen. Really do extract information from as many places as possible so you can reach a somewhat consensual conclusion. And so now we look at exactly what I was just talking about. Ask questions when it comes to those learning outcomes. And in fact, you will understand that the more questions you ask, really the more answers you'll reach. I mean, it seems a bit silly, but that's precisely what happens. This is known as the Socratic method. You ask questions that will step by step take you closer to the final answer, if you will. So let's look at your research questions. This is a topic that a lot of people struggle with. So research questions serve as the foundation of any academic investigation. They guide the direction of research, providing clear focus and purpose. And in the context of this assignment, research questions explore various aspects of the music industry, its trends, challenges, opportunities, and so on. So let's look at a couple of examples on how to construct those research questions. First of all, you have to identify the area of interest within the music industry that you wish to explore. Refine your topic by considering specific aspects or subtopics. I advise writing in bullet points, but find your own way, and whatever works, it works. Then consider the scope and the feasibility of your research. What does that mean? You have to consider how large or niche your research will be. If it's too broad, you'll probably find yourself lost in the weeds. If it's too narrow, you'll probably find yourself not actually getting to the core of that industry. And also the feasibility, what does that mean? It means, can you do it? Okay, are you taking on more than what you can handle, or is it just too easy, which might eventually harm your grade? Formulate clear and concise questions that address specific objectives. That's fundamental. We've already talked about this, and we'll look at that in more depth with some examples. Review and revise your questions to ensure that they still align with your research objectives, or in this case, your learning outcomes. Okay. Let's take a look at do's and don'ts. I apologize, this slide is very busy, and I appreciate that. So I'm just going to cover one good research question and one not so good. So an example that I came up with was, how has the rise of digital streaming platforms impacted revenue generation for independent musicians in the last 10 years? And then I explain why this question is well constructed. The research question is specific, focused, and addresses a clear aspect of the music industry. It aims to explore the impact of digital streaming platforms, and it's got a specific timeline, 10 years. It's got a specific cohort, independent musicians, and it can be very quantifiable because of the revenue aspect of it. Now, an example of a question that would not be so good. Do people prefer pop music over classical music? Right. Don't ask questions like this, right? This is based on taste. It's not quantifiable. It's purely subjective. You will merely write an article, almost an editorial. Let's not go there. That's not academic work. So overly simplistic, can be answered with a simple yes or no, but really it can't. It lacks specificity, I apologize, and fails to explore the factors influencing music preferences, which is more of a psychological question, right? So let's not go there. It's not the purpose of this assignment. Let's talk about research methodologies, and something else that also catches a lot of people out. They feel very overwhelmed by all these different things. I'm going to try to make it as practical as possible. So quantitative research methodologies. So it comes from quantity. Okay, so you're analyzing numbers, basically quantities. Okay, looking at qualitative research methodologies, you're talking about quality, which is much more on the basis of opinion, impact, subjective nature of things. Okay, so for example, quantitative, again, quantity, common quantitative research methods in the music industry could be using surveys, experiments, statistics. So again, if you're talking about revenue per musician, that's a statistic. You will reach a mean, an average. So, for example, you could want to use this if you're talking about percentages of consumers who prefer streaming services over buying vinyl or CDs or whatever. How does the average ticket price of music festivals correlate with attendance? Okay, so correlations to find causations. On the qualitative research methodology side, you could want to use this when you're asking questions such as how do music artists perceive, that's the keyword, right, the impact of social media on their creative process and fan engagement, right? So this is self-reported, it's perception, it's impact, like I said earlier. Okay, so you have to decide on these methodologies only once you ask your research questions. Obviously, you can also use both. That's perfectly doable and sometimes advisable. And for example, if the research question you're asking is, how does the implementation of digital marketing strategies, which is a quantitative thing, impact the branding and audience engagement, which is qualitative, of emerging music artists? Data collection. So if you're doing research, you're going to have to collect data. And so you might need to run surveys, interviews, observations, document analysis, secondary data sources. But bear in mind that primary sources are much more valuable. So be careful when you do your research. And I'll give you a little tip on how to Google these sorts of things, because you don't want to be reading blog articles written by, you know, any John Doe out there. Data analysis techniques depend on the chosen research methodologies and may involve statistical analysis, thematic coding, content analysis, or discourse analysis. Let me translate that a little bit. You'll have to actually interpret, for example, when it comes to discourse analysis, if you're reading a Reddit thread on the probably more on a more qualitative aspect of your research, you'll have to try and extract the common themes. What's the common thread? No pun intended. And of course, rigorous data collection and analysis will ensure the reliability and validity of your findings. Okay, don't just wing it. We can actually test your experiments and theories much more easily if they are corroborated by good sources. Okay, let's talk about organization skills. You'll have to be organized, okay? You will want to procrastinate, you will want to do this last minute, you will want to do all the classics. Don't be that person. You can present fantastic work just by staying organized, and you will not have to burn yourself out by just doing all the work within the last 5 days. So, step 1, make a plan, okay? You have to have some sort of outline that will help you just, you know, approach your work step by step. Then schedule and prioritize your tasks. There's multiple approaches to how to prioritize tasks. I have my own approaches, so if you guys want to have a conversation about this, we can do. It is personal. Some people prefer to do the most difficult task first. Some people prefer to do the easier tasks first to kind of give you a small win that gives you some momentum. So like I say, it is personal. Let's have a chat about it. Stay organized. Okay, to-do lists are king and queens. Use your lists, use note-taking, use as many tools as possible. Avoid procrastination, right? This one is easier said than done, isn't it? But it is very important that you guys understand that wanting to procrastinate is natural, but it's just your brain avoiding difficulty. So in those moments, just remind yourselves, this is just part and parcel of the challenge I've taken on, and embrace it. Make sure you manage your time, okay? So don't underwork, but also don't overwork, because you'll end up resenting the work. So dedicate 2 hours of organized and productive time. Break it into maybe 4 different tasks that will contribute towards your work, and assess at the end, write your to-do list for the next day, and give yourself a break. Seek support. We are here, the college is here, your tutors are here to help, your friends are here to help, so don't just take it all on by yourself. Just explore your options when it comes to networking. So how to structure your presentation. So first, I would suggest this sort of format. You can find your own, and feel free to also ask questions as to whether this works or not. So introduce the research questions at the top of your presentation. That makes the topic quite clear. Then present what methodologies you've used. Then present the data you've collected using those methodologies. Present your critique and your final thoughts. Okay. Time each section appropriately so you don't fall short or exceed your allotted time. You only have 10 minutes. Communicate in a professional way. This is training for future employment opportunities. I can tell you, quick story, I've employed now hundreds of music teachers, and many of them might be very knowledgeable when it comes to their music skills, but their personal skills were not up to standard. We are in a people business and industry, so start practicing now. Be clear. No ums and ahs and this and that. Avoid verbal crutches like, things like that. You can only use the word like when it actually makes sense in the sentence. Please don't say things like that's sick and that's lit, or I don't know, whatever is cool nowadays. Don't say that. Be professional. Take your time. Thoughtful pauses are more powerful than rushing through valuable information. Maintain appropriate levels of eye contact. Don't avoid it, but also don't stare. Make it appropriate. You are presenting your conclusions on a topic you've chosen, so be passionate. Don't just regurgitate the information. Again, very busy slide, and I once again apologize. This is the very last one. So this is a basic frequently asked questions list. So for example, how do I decide which information to include in my presentation? You have to consider the research questions and the learning outcomes, and obviously also who you are presenting to. How can I effectively transition between different sections? Use transitional phrases. Clearly signal when you're moving on from one point to another. Don't just rush through it, and can be as simple as using the word therefore, or and so, and you carry on, which results in, and you carry on. Okay. Next question. How can I make sure my written format stays within the 500 words? Right. First of all, do not edit whilst you write. Okay. Don't do that. It's only gonna force you to overthink what you're writing. So when you're writing your first draft, just write. However, once you go into the editing process, you will have to consider what's relevant, what's derivative, what's just a filler. You will find those those clunky sentences in your writing, I'm sure. So that's when you do the cleaning up. Is it necessary to provide citations or references in my 10-minute oral presentation? Well, you will not be doing like a formal referencing thing during your oral presentation, but you have to reference the sources. So you can say something like, as per, insert the author of an article or a study, or as per so-and-so study published in so-and-so year. So yes, you can and should do that during your presentation. How many points or main points should I include in my 10-minute oral presentation? I would say 2 to 4, okay? Even in my example before, I showed you, I think it was four steps, okay? So research questions, methodologies, data, critique. Boom, the end, okay? Time it, practice at home, do your homework, and good luck. If you have any questions, let us know. Rock and roll.